Hello, live listener. This is Martin Willis, and I do want to apologize for you trying to watch the show the other night, and we had some audio issues. The first part of the show is pre-recorded news with Alejandro Rojas, which worked perfectly, but once I started trying to have John Hanson on the show, everything kind of fell apart, and I'm not really sure, and it was the middle of the night for him. So anyway, I do apologize for that. And podcast listeners, I also apologize to you because this is a couple of days late. But better late than never, as they say. And we're going to begin the first part of the pre-recorded part of the show here coming up. And here we go.
And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have a great one for you this evening. We have John Hanson coming up, and he is in the UK, which means that's about 1 o'clock a.m. his time. And he was gracious enough to want to come on the show. You may know him from his Haunted Skies series and also the book he did, The Halt Perspective with Charles Halt. So he's coming up. Alejandro Rojas is coming up in just a minute with the UFO updates. And next Monday is the first Everything Else show, and that's with the Enos. Ben and Paul Eno are going to be on that show, and basically the title of their talk is going to be Everything We Know Is Wrong. I think that's a great and interesting topic. So they're coming up on Monday, and that's YouTube only. So that's YouTube live stream only, and then it will be posted as a regular video up on YouTube. Nothing is changing here at Podcast UFO. We're still going to have the shows every week just the way we always have. The only thing is we are live streaming on the YouTube, and you can see that right on our front page, on our homepage at podcastufo.com. If you ever want to join in there, and the chat room is very, very active. I don't know how many people are in there at one time, but it's a lot of fun. So that's what's happening with that, and if you support the show, I want to thank you very much for doing that, and we are ready to roll. Alejandro, you must be pretty tired. Hello.
I've rested up. I slept most of the last couple of days, although I spent a lot of time answering emails and posting beautiful photos by Nathan Collishaw and Carlo Petrick, who take photos at the conference. And so if you go to the Facebook page for the UFO Congress, and they're at openminds.tv, you'll see some really cool photos of the speakers, the attendees, and other stuff related to the conference. And that's one of the fun things, is to have photographers there to take some really cool photos. So, yeah.
Wow. And, yeah, I'm really sorry I couldn't get out there. It's just one of those things.
I can't believe you didn't get out there.
It was really heartbreaking. Yeah. Next year, it's going to be a road trip. I'm going to leave a week early and drive. I probably should leave now. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, who knew? I mean, it was really hard for us to get Stanton Friedman in because he was snowed out, so It took a long time, but luckily we were able to figure it out. So that's frustrating and sad, yeah, but luckily we did get Stanton out there. He was going to speak the first night, but ended up having to speak on Friday. He did a great job as usual, and we did have a government and UFO panel on Thursday night because he had made it by Thursday evening that he was a part of. That was wonderful. So luckily we got Stanton to be a part of it. We also had problems with James James Fox getting in, and he was
Really?
coming from California.
Right.
But his plane had mechanical issues that they canceled the flight, so
Oh,
we
no.
were struggling and finally got him out there. But it goes to show you that it's not just weather that could possibly be at issue to make you miss flights and events and stuff.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I was wondering at first when you said James Fox if it had to do with the torrential rain they're having out there.
No, I guess not.
Yeah.
Not weather related at all. His issue. Yeah.
So I'm sure it was an absolute blast. I saw a lot of pictures from people on Facebook and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the Phoenix Lights incident is coming right up on the 20th anniversary. And did you get to actually speak with some of the witnesses?
Oh yeah. So we had a panel. We also had James Fox brought a couple witnesses. Some couldn't make it. But it was really cool. James Fox is a great speaker. It was a lot of fun. He also showed a video, never before seen video of Fife Symington. So it was his full interview with Symington. And Symington had some interesting things to say, like he tried to contact the Pentagon and all of these other things. In James Fox's documentary, Out of the Blue, we got to see some of Symington, and we've seen some other interviews. But this was more than I've ever seen before. So we will be posting that. We'll also be posting some other interviews. And, we play clips from people talking about the Phoenix Lights at the conference. But we'll be posting a news video that's with all of that. And the local Arizona Historical Society, the museum, actually has a Phoenix Lights display, which is pretty cool. And the local Phoenix MUFON got to help put that together. So we'll be showing an interview with the lady who runs the museum, talking about the Phoenix Lights and how important it was to the Phoenix area, and her thoughts and everything on that. So that's pretty cool too.
Wow. So did some of the witnesses that Out of the Blue, were they there? They were in that movie Out of the Blue?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Wow, yeah, because there was some watching that movie, there was some great descriptions, like the young boy talking about seeing the waving, like the heat wave, underneath, and then all these people actually trying to guess the size of this thing. There was some great witnesses.
Yeah. Yep. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Anything happening? Have you been able to check the news with all the things going on?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what I do, dude.
That's what you
That's
do.
what I do.
Right.
So there's been some stuff out there. Of course, there was a big NASA announcement, and it's always funny because I'm sorry, UFO people, but quit getting so friggin' crazy over special NASA announcements. Why do they do this? Everybody makes a big deal, like, they're going to talk about aliens or something, and I don't know why people get so worked up, because it's NASA, meaning that they're going to be talking about something more prosaic. Now, I feel that their announcements are still really exciting, like this one, which came out today, which is that they found a solar system with a smaller sun that has something like 7 planets, a bunch of planets that are in the habitable zone.
Wow.
And not all of those they feel might be habitable, but some of them they think are. So it is cool. It's cool news. It's news that may lead to the possibility or discovery of evidence of extraterrestrial life at some level, but it wasn't, that...
wasn't earth-shattering. Hey, now, I wonder if we were being observed, and which has probably happened, I'm sure, at least. I mean, I don't know what all these UFOs would be, or why we'd be here in the first place if we weren't. But anyway, if we were being looked at from afar, if Mars would be considered in the habitable zone. Do you know if that's so or not?
That's a great question. I don't know.
It would be right on the cusp of it, if not. But 7 planets in a habitable zone, I think, is a pretty big deal, because those could be all, neighbors. If there was actually intelligent life on, on some of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think
they go to their
or they could, relocate and, make settlements on if they are indeed habitable.
Yeah, I guess they think 3 of the 7 planets could be habitable. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's
Another
interesting.
thing out of the Congress is we also posted a video today, and this was our UFO Researcher of the Year award. So we give out awards. We give out some EBE Film Festival awards, but we also do a UFO Researcher of the Year and a Lifetime Achievement Award. And they're a surprise until the award ceremony on Saturday. And Michael Klein, our video guy, puts together these great videos to highlight the work of these people. And the winner for 2017 for us was Tom DeLonge, the rock star. And people may be wondering, well, why the hell is it Tom DeLonge? Well, you can watch this video and see why. And I think the video thoroughly justifies him winning the award. Now, he couldn't be there to accept it. However, he did send us an acceptance video, which is really cool. And like a lot of what he's been saying, it's really mysterious and everything. But given the people he's talking to, it gives it a little more gravitas, I guess. But, yeah, people can – we just posted this on YouTube not even an hour ago, I think. So you can go to our YouTube and see the video that we put together explaining why we gave him the award. And then you can see his response, which is pretty fun there also.
Great. Wow.
Yeah. So that's a little piece of news.
Yeah. It's too bad he couldn't come, but I'm looking forward to watch that video.
Yeah, he's been to the Congress before.
Right.
I didn't get to meet him, unfortunately, but hopefully he'll come again one day, and I will get to meet him. But it's pretty cool. I mean, he's really into this stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe speaker for 2018. You never know.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Anything else happening?
Well, we did post a UFO sighting, so I guess I could look. This one's from Wisconsin from November 28th, 2016. These people said this was in Little Swamico. That's how you say it, I think. And this is outside, I guess, of Green Bay. And they said that they saw a triangle-shaped object move out of Green Bay, so out of the water, that appeared to be 100 to 150 feet in length. Now, it was nighttime. It was 2:10 a.m., and they were outside stargazing when this took place. But, yeah, they said it flew out of the water. They felt it was traveling at 35 knots. So these people must know, what 35 knots would be. They must, sail a lot or something. But they said it was pretty close, and they felt they can hear a muffled jet sort of noise. And they said as it came out of the water, it kind of turned on its side and traveled west and then gained elevation. They said it was dark, and it had blue flashing lights. It was less than 1,000 feet from them. So
that's incredible.
That's kind of weird.
It is, and I got to say that, I had my sighting, and then I always think that, I probably wouldn't be scared having another sighting, but if something came up out of the water in front of me, I think that would really petrify me. I think that it just seems there's an added element to that. I can't imagine being out on a boat or something, and a small boat and a large object coming up out of the water. That just would be kind of terrifying, but all interesting. So that must be it for the news this week.
That's it for the news this week, but good to be talking to you again. Of course, we very much missed you there. I know I ignored your messages and stuff, but I get so busy, it's insane. I'm just running during the whole thing, and then going to bed as early as possible to try to get 8 hours, because otherwise I get beat. Oh, my gosh, I feel like the living dead.
I'm sure. And
often during that event. So
Yeah, it's no problem. Well, all right. And just one thing to the listening audience out there that I forgot to say is the show that I'm having on Monday is on the Everything Else show.com, and that's everything-else-show.com, and that link is also on the top banner of my website. So thanks so much, Alejandro, and we'll be talking to you next week.
Do I have time to fit in a quick joke?
Yeah, okay, I'll yeah, why not?
I may have already done this one because Paulino does the everything you know is wrong.
Oh, yes.
You think you know is
you
wrong?
I think you did this, yes.
Oh, I did
Everything
this joke.
you know is right.
Yeah, because what if someone did something, everything you know is right?
That's right. I think you did that on Google Hangouts. But anyway, that's cool. That's all
funny,
right.
though.
It's still funny. All right, everyone, hang in there for this quick little music break, and we'll be right back with John Hanson. Welcome to the show, John.
Hello, and welcome to you.
Yes, we finally made it.
I'm amazed.
Well, I do appreciate you being up in the middle of the night for us over there, but we're getting it together. It seems to be working fine, and thanks for hanging in and agreeing to come back. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So why don't you give the listening audience a little bit of background about yourself and how you got interested in the topic? I know it was in 1995 you had a sighting. I'd like to hear a little more about that sighting as well, if I could.
Well, in 1995, I sort of retired from the West Midlands Police in the United Kingdom. And prior to that, I had no interest in UFOs or the paranormal. And if somebody had mentioned that to me then, I would have treated it with probably contempt, because as far as I was concerned, rationalizing all of this, how on earth could you believe that in the 20th century or 21st century as it is now, how could these things exist? But of course, that changed for me in January 1995 when my son, who's just then joined the police, he's now a detective chief inspector, he was directed to a report of a UFO hovering over some trees in the south of Birmingham. And when he got there with the policewoman, they saw this this cigar-shaped object hovering over some trees, and within seconds it had gone. Well, when he told me what had happened, to be honest, I thought it was a joke. And it's one of those pivotal moments in your life when I was actually flat out on the settee watching the X-Files. And of course, I've liked science fiction, X-Files, Star Trek, loved it. But there's no reality to it, of course, or at least I thought there wasn't. Anyway, as a result of what my son told me, I was intrigued, and I tracked down some people that had also seen it. A few minutes later, some 100 miles away, went and interviewed them. And then to cap it all, I went to a conference in that year, or should I say a talk at the university, where this guy was showing photographs of aliens at Area 41. And, most of the audience sat there believing it, but I certainly didn't regard the plasticine-shaped object depicted on a photograph as being representative of any alien being at Area 51. And eventually, one member of the audience, not me, he stood up and he challenged the speaker, and the speaker admitted that was the case. So that was a valuable lesson to me. And I've been to a lot of these talks, and people will take it all on board, but I think ultimately it needs investigating, and that's what I set out to do over 20 years ago. And the frightening part about this is that I have written or co-written with my partner recently with Charles Halt, his book. But we've written now 12 volumes, and they are big volumes. And we've catalogued not only reports of UFO sightings in England, but Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, because this is our heritage, and we think it's important that it be written, and that's where we are. And the frightening part about it is that when we started in 1995, we have only got up to 1992. And that is frightening. So 22 years work, investigations, research, traveling the country, interviewing people, putting it all together, and we've only reached 1992. So it's my lifelong ambition to try and get to the end of the 20th century before I end up disappearing out the 21st. So
wow.
That in a nutshell. But it is commitment, it's dedication, and the astonishing part about it is that, contrary to what some people have suggested, you don't make any money out of it, and that, of course, is not what we're about.
Yes, that's true. I've heard that a lot. That is, there is a misconception. There are some people that I do believe attempt to make a living out of it. I can name a few, but won't. But for someone to try to get into this for the whole subject of money is a total wrong approach. It has to be more like a passion of interest. Otherwise it's just going to be a short road. Now, do you ever take on new cases as far as looking into them, investigating them at all, or are you just in the historic part of the
Well, of course, invariably during newspaper exposure, and that is something I will discuss in a minute, but invariably it's more of somebody that knows somebody else who's had a sighting, or somebody else who's had an experience, or somebody else that claims to have had. When I say, I'm not so sure I'm too happy with the words alien abduction, but I certainly have met enough people that have been at the receiving end of the energies given off by these objects, close encounters, if you want to call them, and they've had some pretty frightening, not only physical, but medical ailments that follow. And when you contrast all these cases together, it's pretty obvious there's something out there which is obviously causing this. But when we originally published Volume 1, which is a 320-page black and white book back in 2010, the British press were very interested in us and asked us for a book, which documents a lot of the early sightings from Second World War pilots, many of whom I've been interviewed personally. And suffice to say, we've never had any publicity. And here we are, 12 volumes, including the Halt perspectives. We have not had any publicity. So you've got to say to yourself, well, we must be doing something right here.
Wow. That is quite amazing. Now, have you been? I saw that you were in a documentary. Has that approach helped any type of publicity for you?
Which particular document? Which particular
someone that actually
document?
came to your home and interviewed you.
Oh, I see. That's a lady from Cardiff University, Amy Kerridge, who came along and had a look through the files and took some photographs. I think it's to do with a photography degree. In fact, she phoned me up yesterday wanting me to introduce her to all of the UFO witnesses. But of course, that's easier said than done. But from a personal point of view, I think you have to meet these people that have had these experiences. Otherwise, how can you evaluate or analyze what they're telling you? Because they do the same to me. And over the years, I feel quite privileged to to have interviewed these people. You know, when you interview guys from the 1950s, and we will talk about Bentwater soon, Woodbridge, but of course the 1956 UFO incident at Bentwaters and Woodbridge. The only way to cover that, of course, and there's a lot of it on the internet, is to speak to the flight controller, is to speak to the pilots, and that's what we've done. I mean, I have to say, we're not celebrities. We're not really known because we can't get these books out into a wider audience, but we are pleased by what we're doing, and certainly programs like yours, Martin, could only enhance, hopefully, my reputation instead of impairing it. But yeah, it's about getting the message across, and I am, of course, a firm believer because because of the amount of sightings and experiences that people have told me about. You can't help but not be a believer.
Right. And I get what you're saying about interviewing people personally, because to me that does make quite a difference. And getting back to the statement I heard you say just a minute ago, it sounds like you're a bit on the fence about abductees or experiencers or whatever they are. And I myself I was in the beginning, but there are certain people that I've talked to that I think are totally credible. Travis Walton, for one, and I'm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Did you say offense or defense?
I'm sorry. I did. I don't remember saying that.
Right, I thought you just said that. It must be a doppelganger then, because I what I wanted to say was that categorically, when people interview me, they say, well, do you believe in alien abductions? Well, of course, I can't necessarily prove that alien abductions take place, but what I can prove to a great degree is that a lot of people, men and women, and I've interviewed them over the years, they've had the misfortune to get close to a UFO. I'm not talking about something that's constructed by human hands, something that, again, in my opinion, is indigenous to the planet. This phenomenon has been here for, again, it's my opinion, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And if you have a lot of people sometimes regard it as being in the right place or the right time, others regard it as the opposite. But some pretty frightening things can happen to you, and for which I cannot give these people any answer. So broadly speaking, yes, it's an alien abduction, but I think you have to be careful with an evaluation such as that, because quite a lot of people, can use it quite loosely. I can only tell, for argument's sake, one particular incident involved somebody from the Warminster area many years ago. I spoke to the mother, but the mother had seen a cigar-shaped object hovering in the sky, and her daughter had seen it as well. In fact, it was a daughter that said, look at that. And the mother looked at it, went back in the house, and a few hours later, the daughter said, my stomach or my tummy's hurting, Mum. And the mother looked, and there were these three little triangular dots on the stomach. Well, that's not the first time or the last time I've heard of things like that. And the weird part about it is that the husband, who was working 40 miles away, came home, and during conversation later said to his wife, I've had a hell of a day, and I've got this rash on my stomach. And, if you heard stories like this for the first time, you'd regard them as, you'd be not inclined to believe them. But when you've heard so many people tell you similar stories, well, it's pretty obvious that something very strange does spasmodically occur, and unfortunately, we ultimately suffer for it individually. So my heart goes out to people that have had these experiences.
Right. And, when you talk about things been happening for possibly thousands of years, I totally agree with you, because, time on a larger scope, this is just a little sliver of time. Even a million years is just a sliver of time, really, as far as, the universe. And so 1956, Bentwaters. I never heard about this. Can you elaborate on that?
This was a series of blips that were picked up by the radar, and the RAF were launched to intercept. And the object then, it wasn't visually seen, but was on the radar, and the pilots went up to see it. I didn't see it. It shot off, and they were all warned to keep quiet. But it's I think at the time the Daily Express ran the story about some of the pilots, getting a lock on their radio. Well, as the flight controller told me, and bearing in mind, I'm remembering all this from memory. I mean, we could speak for a couple of weeks on what's in the books and go back to that particular case, but because there was no lock-on radar at all. I mean, and another fantastic case, 57, was a guy called Milton Torres, now Dr. Torres, and I was in touch with him some years ago, and he was scrambled to intercept an object over the UK, and at some stage he was asked to open fire on it, and this is over civilian territory. He was asked to open fire. And 10 seconds from opening fire, the thing then shot off and disappeared. And the consequences of what could have happened if he had attacked it, I don't know. I mean, there are many stories about not only American fighter planes, but some British being downed after trying to intercept these objects. But I as I say, agree with you. It's pretty obvious these things go back thousands, if not millions of years. And that is the frightening part about it.
Right. We have some questions that came in this last week to our forum. I'm just going to pitch a couple of them to you here and there. One of them is he is saying that he's a subscriber to the show and he lives in Wales. He's interested in an incident called the Broadhaven Triangle back in 1977. Wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about that.
I would absolutely love to. First of all, we investigated the Broadhaven incident February the 4th, 1977, when children from Broadhaven County Primary School saw an object on the side of the hill described as cigar-shaped, and some of the children had seen figures next to it. A lot of papers will advertise it as the British equivalent of Roswell, as they have done with the Woodbridge Bentwaters case of 1980. But there were a number of witnesses to this, and Dawn, my partner, and I, Dawn Holloway, we were only there last week. We've been there a number of times, and the 40th anniversary took place on the 4th of February, and we met up with some smashing people, including a guy called David Davis, who I've kept in touch with for years, and he was one of the first school children to see it, and ended up bringing it to the attention of a guy called Randall Jones Pugh, who was the Bufora investigator for that area. And over the years, we've spoken to a number of people that have seen strange things, including, of course, the strange figures at Ripperston Farm. There was a couple called Billy and Pauline Coombs that lived there, but the place is rich with it. Absolutely rich with sightings like that. And in fact, what we're doing at the moment, in our revised volume 3, that will have a front cover of the school and also the original images of which I've got next to me as drawn by those kids 40 years ago. So that is a fascinating place. And another lady court that we went to see was Francine Granville. She runs the Fort Haven Hotel, and her mum, Rosa, that passed away in 2012, witnessed this object landed at the back of the garden, and these two figures get out of the craft, as a result of which, after they'd gone, that they found part of the roof burnt. And but cases like that cannot help but not only excite your imagination, but they're real stories, and they're from real, genuine people. And I never get tired of listening to these. And if somebody rings me up and says, "Oh, I had a UFO sighting last night," or "I want to tell you about this," I never cease to be fascinated by those reports. Although I have to say, many years ago, I went to see Gordon Creighton, who was the editor of Flying Saucer Review. He lived at Rickmansworth in Hertfordshire. And we went to see Gordon, and this was probably about 1993. And we took our folder of files down to see him. And he was reasonably impressed, because he said, do you want to be consultants for Flying Saucer Review? And we were for a short time until, sadly, he later passed away. But I do remember saying to him, as I'm saying to you, I find these fascinating and very interesting reports, and sometimes they're a little humorous. And he said something like, well, you can't say they're humorous, John. These things are not humorous. We should take them seriously. And that's what he said. And, I don't know. I think you can't lose your sense of humor with this, but it's pretty serious stuff. And I would say, when is man on this planet, when is the human race going to fully accept that these things exist? Because let's be fair, we discuss it. There's a lot of interested people who talk about this subject, but predominantly the majority of the public still treat us like fools.
Yes, that's right.
I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. Wanted to ask you about that. In just a minute, I want you to hold up. I know most people listen to the show instead of actually watch it on YouTube. But in a minute, I want you to hold up a couple of those drawings, if you would.
Right.
Yeah. So, speaking of ridicule, can you tell me what it's like being a retired police officer and doing what you do? I mean, do you ever get any flack from, fellow, say, former colleagues or anything like that?
No, not really. I keep in touch with some of my colleagues. My son, Chris, he's not interested in the subject at all, and I can understand that, because people have lives to lead. And it is, a subject that you can get pretty immersed in. But I've lived and breathed it with Dawn. In fact, as we talk, Dawn's upstairs doing the proofreading on the revised volume 2, which is 60 to 70. And we mentioned about the Welsh stuff. That would be in the revised volume 3. Because the guys out there and the ladies might not realise that our first 6 books that we laboured industriously over for 2.5 years no longer exist. They were taken off the for sale by our ex-publisher, and I don't really want to discuss that any further. But they were taken off for sale, so that left us with little chance. But we did say we remain convinced that people want these books in colour. And they don't want lots of text and a few pictures in the middle. So that's what we've done. And obviously the books are typeset properly by a guy called Bob Tibbets. He'll probably tell me off if I don't mention his name, but he's an ex-Warminster skywatcher from the 70s. And he puts it all together for us, and obviously charges us, but does a smashing job. And we are very pleased. We met up with Edgar Mitchell a few years ago, and I've got photographs of him with the book. And he was very, very, he thought the books were marvelous. And I'm not dropping names here, but we've worked hard here. And if we can get people to help us, such as Paul Hellier, Paul Hellier has been very helpful, and so many others. We just want. All we want to do is leave a legacy so that people in the future, when we're gone, can have a look through and look at these files. Because let's not forget that prior to 1960-ish, the MOD files were destroyed because there was no need to keep them. And I can assure you that most of the files contained in the revised volume 1, which we've just put out, which covers some of those years, including the revised volume 2, 1960 will have either been thrown away or scrapped by the MOD. Personally, I don't think that many of those files ever existed with the MOD anyway. So it's a big slice of history, and it needs to be preserved.
Wow. Yes. And do you have plans for that in the future? Preserving your files?
Well, of course, in one respect, the books will preserve the files, but right. I'm hoping my daughter will take over something like, I don't know, 500,000 documents, tapes, videos that exist upstairs in our bedroom. There's not much room to move in the bedroom, but these have been from so many fantastic researchers over the years, and I've made mention of course, to the Halt perspective, which I'm just showing here. It's very difficult to show you properly, but that people have actually complained about the price of it, but which is, I don't know what 35 quid in American dollars is. It's about
$44.
My God, that sounds a lot. But this book's cost us a fortune, as you can see. Absolutely fortune. And we've spent, I think, $44 or 35 quid would actually cover one trip to Rendlesham Forest. And the book reflects something like 30, 40 or 50 trips, plus, of course, going to interview people. So and we only make a few dollars or a few quid out of it, and we'll probably never get that back because of the initial outlay. All we want people to do is read it and enjoy it. And if they go on Amazon, they'll see some brilliant reviews. Yes. Before I forget, who's the guy from Wales then?
The listener?
Yeah, sorry.
Let's see. Well, I can send that to you after in case he doesn't want his...
Can you?
Yeah.
I wondered who that was, whether it was David Davis, because, we talked about the kids from Broadhaven School. I have spoken to some of the other children, but out of, 14 children, most of them don't want to come forward. And of course, I'm sure you can understand to some degree that while it's useful to obtain particularly up-to-date interviews with people or children as they were then, a lot of kids appreciate that if you have the courage to come forward, it can change your life and also attract one hell of a lot of ridicule. So we go back to the conversation we had before, that we live in an age where, the subject matter, particularly by the media, and I'm sorry about this, but, I've looked through thousands of newspaper cuttings going back to the 60s and 70s where there's an accurate story, but the banner-grabbing headline is calculated to make anybody that reads that article just lose interest in it straight away because it's Mickey taking. So, maybe I was there once, but not now. It should be treated with far more seriousness than it is.
Right, and I want to get pretty deeply for a while into the bent waters, but for right now, there's a question up on our chat room. And Ed wants to know, can you talk about the PC Alan Godfrey and the sightings in the, I don't know how to pronounce that, Penetis? Are you familiar with that
Penetis? One? Well, yes, of course I know Alan Godfrey. I'm just trying to, I'm trying to find, it's in the, here it is. Right, this was an original book that we wrote with something about Rendlesham, but also the Alan Godfrey case. And I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with the area. I've spoken to Alan. There was very interesting because Alan Godfrey, he was also involved in an incident at Todmorden, Yorkshire, in 1980, where a Polish miner was found deceased on the top of a stack of coal at the Todmorden railway station. And once again, you can see that the press had a field day and linked Mr. Zygmunt Adamski, that was his name, Zygmunt Adamski, and they linked his death to alien interaction and suggested that a UFO had dropped him on top of the heap. And now that is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever come across. And certainly with that particular incident, I investigated it with Alan's help, and also Graham Birdsall from the old defunct UFO magazine. And we managed to identify who the perpetrator was and what had happened. He'd been held he'd been imprisoned and held in a place for some days, and then he had a heart attack, and they dumped his body on top of this coal. And even today, people will argue that this was to do with alien activity, but it's nothing of the sort. And I stand against rubbish like that. But yeah, I know Alan well, and we've been to the scene, and his was a very genuine complaint. And again, what Alan drew and what Alan witnessed, again, I have thousands of sightings like that. You started the program off by talking about triangular UFOs. Triangular UFOs, crikey, I have probably 1,000 of them previously unpublished, and which happened around the Essex, Colchester, Suffolk, East Anglia area. And once again, you can parallel those sightings with what happened in Belgium in the late 1980s. But again, nobody's interested in the local newspapers around that area about publishing any of this. Although, having said that, I must say that a very nice man called Tom Potter from the East Anglian Daily Times, a really nice guy, he did quite a good spread on the Halt book in the East Anglia Daily Times. So occasionally you do meet some helpful people, but so far, generally speaking, the subject matter is denigrated by the press. I mean, I've been criticised for attacking the press, but come on, I've done 12 books. I mean, we talked about the Halt book. You can get anything out there on the Halt book, and I was even invited to the Daily Mirror. I won't tell you the gentleman's name, at my own expense. And when I got there, they promised me a story, never had it. Oh. Yeah, so I don't know how you would feel.
Geez. To be promised and then to go through the effort, yeah, that's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Yeah, especially using the tube.
Yeah, the subway for those Americans that don't know what that is.
Yeah. Right, just as frightening, just as frightening.
Right,
but
right.
Yeah, it's not the way to treat people, is it?
Right, not at all.
Well, we were talking about Rendlesham, I think, at some stage.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we will. But I wanted to ask you the Warminster UFO.
Right.
That has fascinated me. And as far as you know, are things still happening there? Because that was like an ongoing thing, right?
Well, it was in the 70s. My impression, actually, is that, first of all, when people talk about UFO waves, yes, that sometimes you get high peaks of UFO activity, but a wave is a good description if you can imagine a wave coming across the geological landscape. And of course, over the years, the waves, they will move across the landscape, and you will get peaks of activity in one location, which will die down. And then those peaks will manifest in another location. So, yeah, the 70s, the 60s, 64, 65 and the 70s, there was a lot of stuff around the Warminster area. And we've, in fact, in the process of just finishing the Wiltshire book, which reflects, again, over 20 years' time that Dawn and I spent in Avebury, Stonehenge, Wiltshire, Warminster, meeting up with people. And we can honestly say that, we have a hell of a lot of information that's never been published, including letters from Arthur Shuttleworth. I never met Arthur, but I knew a lot of people that did, and some of the reports are anecdotal. Some people say he embellished and whatever. I don't know, but some of the stories, some of the stories are fantastic, and undoubtedly, there was a lot of UFO activity over there, and it attracted people from all over the world.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the guy there to speak to, I suppose, is either Kevin Goodman or Steve Wills. Steve Wills runs the Warminster UFO site, and he's been very helpful. Only recently he interviewed a couple of witnesses for us, but that book should be out soon. Again, all I ask is people read them, and I guarantee you will not find anything else like that out there.
Yeah, Kevin's been on the show before. Real nice guy. So
Yeah,
I wanted
yeah.
to ask you, did you hear about, I know you had absolutely no interest in any paranormal or UFO topics or anything before your sighting in 1995, but did you hear about Bent Waters when it came out? Is that something that caught your attention or not? When that
No,
went public?
Are you talking about a 1980 case?
Yes. Yes.
No, I mean, I could say to you that when I was in the police as a young copper in the 60s, 1966 to 67, if you as a member of public would have stopped me and said, "What do you know about UFOs?" I would have probably regarded you as a nutcase or something. But the frightening thing is that I didn't even know that there was a huge amount of activity, particularly which peaked in October 67, not only in Britain but in the States. And for me, the classic case there is the 24th of October, 67, when two police constables, both of whom I know, and the one guy, Roger Wiley, is now passed away. But I've interviewed Roger a number of times, and his son Mark keeps all his dad's stuff. But to have spoken to Roger, who was there and witnessed it, it's fantastic. But I think it was the media said that it was Mars or Venus that the police officers were chasing. But if that was the case, then how do you explain the other 45 other sightings, throughout the 24 hours? So yeah, we've got all those, and we've got the pictures. For me, the photographs of people. It's not only about UFOs; it's about people. And sometimes there are links between people and UFOs. Sometimes people have had experiences before. But yeah, sometimes paranormal. There was a time I thought there was a distinct difference between UFOs and paranormal. But a lot of people that have had a UFO experience will have had a paranormal experience, and perhaps will then have paranormal manifestations after a UFO experience. I'm probably rattling on here mainly because there is so much to talk about, and really we don't have all the time in the world. If we did, we could go on like this I could go through the books and we could be here in a week's time. But unfortunately, most of the people watching this will have fallen asleep.
Oh, I've got the time.
Now, well, so far so good. It's all working out at the moment, isn't it? There's no glitches.
Well, there's a little bit of a glitch with my high-speed internet, but the audio is good.
Oh, right.
The audio is good.
Yeah.
So
well, that's that. We can survive on that then.
Yeah, that's right. So you mentioned just a minute ago, if someone asked you back in the 60s, you would think they were a nutcase. That is kind of like the common mantra when it comes to this topic.
Yeah.
Do you think it's less? Yeah. Do you think it's less now, or do you think things haven't changed?
Well, I don't think things have changed at all, really. I suppose that there is a problem with the fact that we now we have social media, we have the internet, which is a fantastic form of communication. But a lot of people will rely on what they read about as being gospel on the internet. I think things have got slightly worse, if you like, because back in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, there was an awful lot of academics and scientists that were involved in researching this. I mean, I spoke about Flying Saucer Review, and there was an illustrious list of guys all over the world that assisted Gordon Creighton and some of the previous editors. But we look back now, and I'm sure a lot of people will know about Flying Saucer Review. But for those that don't know about it, they would be shocked to realize that those magazines, which are always being sold on the internet, those magazines cover thousands and thousands of fantastic research, investigations, and sightings by the public all over the world. And my question to you actually is, where has it got us?
I know there's been...
Where has it actually got us?
I've heard, I've said this on the show before, I've talked to a number of people that have, I guess, what you'd call the UFO burnout. Like they thought there would be an answer.
Yes.
They were in this a long time, and they thought they would have more of an answer than they do after so many years of looking into it.
Yeah.
I still think it's fascinating, whether it's gotten us anywhere or not, all this work. It's just, I think it, we may just find out someday, possibly, but it may be something entirely different than what we think it is.
I think you're so true, and maybe it's quite possible that because it's something so totally unlike anything we could even imagine, is one of the reasons why there isn't any disclosure. Because I can't say that that an alien influence rules the Earth, or that the aliens are here in various shapes and sizes. I can't say that because I don't know. But maybe it's not about that at all. It's about something much deeper and something far more frightening. I mean, for years, particularly during the 50s, people thought this was the pre-runner of an alien invasion. And I'm sure if you and I had looked at those reports then, and we would have perhaps felt the same back in those days, that, and the common questions were, why don't they land on the White House? Why don't they land in Downing Street? And, but of course that's not their agenda. Whatever these things are, it is not their agenda, if in fact they have an agenda. But we said before at the beginning of the program, these things go back. It's common sense, isn't it? You look at what the Romans talked about, flying shields, and a lot of stuff. The triangular UFOs, people have described them in hundreds of years back. So, these things have been going about their own business, doing what they want. And it may well be that they have one thing that we haven't got, and they have time.
Yeah.
And we don't have that time.
That's a really, really good point. So I'm ready to talk about bent waters and all that. But one other question came up. Have you ever talked to anyone that had a sighting where the object seemed to shrink and disappear? Is that in any of your cases? Uh-huh.
Yes. There's a lot of, in fact, the Chris's sighting, my son's sighting, that's exactly what it did, like a TV screen going off. It just shrunk into itself and disappeared. But we talk about the characteristics of UFOs and what they do or they don't do, but the characteristics more or less remain the same. And I what amazes me more than anything is the commonality of the classic three. We talked about triangular UFOs with a light in each corner. Some people call them triangular UFOs. I mean, and let's not forget, this is a 21st century, 20th century label, isn't it? We label them as triangular UFOs because what we've got is three objects set at a hemispherical distance away from each other, and occasionally one of the objects will move away, as they've done, according to witnesses, and then come back, and then the three objects will move away. Appreciate there's people have seen 5 objects, 10 objects, but 3 objects is predominantly forms the very important background number to so much in the UFO world, so many times, and I think of what Colonel Halt. He said he saw the 3 objects in the sky, and that's one of the reasons why we've supplied in the Halt perspective, I don't know, probably 50 or 60 other sightings around that area, including a place called Thetford Forest in Norfolk, where UFOs were also photographed there. That's one of the reasons why we can associate the if you like, I suppose some people might call it a triangular UFO he saw, the three lights in the sky. But we can associate that with so many other sightings from people in the Essex area on the East Anglia borders of similar objects. And I'm not talking about just lights in the sky. I'm talking about triangular objects at close range with lights in set, forming three lights. And I don't know why that is. I don't know, but that is predominant to more or less everything we do. And we can go back to the 1940s when, I spoke to a couple of pilots that saw these things moving through the sky in the 1940s, triangular UFOs, or they would not have called them triangular UFOs then.
I see.
Anyway, I forgot what you asked me now.
Don't worry.
Too much information.
Yeah, don't worry. So did I. I forgot what I said.
Do you know, we should have been politicians, Martin.
Skip around.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Go on, yeah.
Yeah. So, why do you suppose? I'm just going to ask this right off the bat. Why do you suppose, when it comes to the Rendlesham Forest, there's been discord between a lot of the witnesses? Do you think it had to do with the supposed debriefings to begin with, or the information leaking when it leaked and how it leaked, and perhaps some disinformation out there? It seems like there are different camps when it comes to Rendlesham Forest.
Well, there has been over the years. There's been a lot of discord, and I can tell. I'm certainly not going to name the person. I'm not going to give him the benefit, but one particular guy, and you know who I'm talking about, he did actually has threatened me on a number of occasions. First of all, when I invited Charles Halt over here in 2015, I was barraged on the internet by hundreds of people who said, as far as they concerned, he was a government mole. He was a bad guy. He was this. He was that, and the only one person to believe was the original whistleblower. And I put up with this for some time. I was accused of ripping people off by charging 20 quid a ticket. And my God, Charles Halt had to come from Virginia. He came over. I mean, who remembers that he brought his son, Clifford? Lovely, lovely lad. Nobody was interested in Clifford. Nobody was interested. They were interested in Charles Halt. But what I can say is that was a fantastic talk he gave. There was some rebukes towards the gentleman in question, but the audience were fantastic. They thoroughly enjoyed meeting Charles Halt, and so did I. But that to say that rhetoric, that antagonistic attitude followed for some considerable time before things changed drastically. And people no longer have quite the same confidence in that gentleman. And we reached such a ridiculous degree that Peter Robbins, who I know very well and have a lot of respect for, wrote a book having a knock at Charles Halt and the conference itself. I've got the book here somewhere, which was ridiculous because all he had to do was ask me those questions. But of course, I was threatened in that book as well. I should not publish this book with Charles Halt in it. But I'm sorry, I have every right. It's a democracy we live in. And I've certainly not criticised anybody in the book. But all I've done is present the evidence. And I've presented the evidence, and the reader can make up their own mind. And most of them have done. But of course, yes, to some extent, one has to recognise that these guys were vigorously interviewed, and in all, they were given, I think it was sodium pentothal, the truth drug. I think the OSI were involved, and I don't know what the long-term effects of that are. Maybe that can cause the problems that some of them have been having. But yeah, I mean, I've got nothing but respect for John Burroughs and Jim Penniston and so many others that I've spoken to. But I've also been to see people like Colonel, and this is an interesting comment. I'm glad I remember this. Is that Colonel Al Brown, who was also on the airbase, was a friend of General Gordon E. Williams. Now, isn't it bizarre that I don't know what has happened to General Gordon E. Williams? Now, he was a very good friend of Colonel Brown's, and they used to play golf together. And of course, Colonel Brown, Al Brown, is a fascinating guy. Because he didn't see anything, but it's important to get somebody else's view as well. But he was a very good friend of Gordon's, and I think I spoke to him and his wife Sally about 6 months ago, and they hadn't heard a thing. And isn't that bizarre? I don't know. I mean, I hope the gentleman's all right. But of course, I've tried to be thorough in the book, and there's an awful lot of information that hasn't been published before, including guys that have come forward and told of the radar tapes being seized and warned to keep quiet, and also on another occasion there was some obvious disinformation planted about the radar tapes. And not only that, a lot of people there had paranormal experiences, and that area is full of it and continues to be full of it to this present day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that's always been puzzling to me is why on earth would they be given any type of drugs? It just doesn't make sense to me. In any type of other debriefing, has that ever been done? Have you ever heard of that?
I think it has. Yeah, I think that was a standard practice. I'm pretty sure in the book, it's certainly not allowed to happen now, but that was common practice. This wasn't a one-off for a bunch of guys that's an American Air Force base that saw UFOs in the same bracket. I spoke to a smashing bloke called Roger Arty, and Roger was at RAF Welford, which is near, I'm pretty sure I've got that right, near in Berkshire. And again, I can't remember the exact date. It certainly wasn't 1980, but he and his colleagues, American servicemen on patrol there, also witnessed the daily overflight of saucer-shaped objects over that particular base, and that's not actually that well known about. But that's something else that has been, if you like, not brushed under the carpet, but forgotten about. In the same manner, RAF Alconbury, another the American Air Force base there, lots of stories there about not only paranormal incidents taking place, but I've spoken to people that the perimeter fence has been breached by what appears to be an alien figure, and that some of the guys shot at it and that it disappeared. But there's other stories around there and other sightings of this. I don't know a creature, that's the only way you can describe it, but these things exist, I'm sure of that, and so many stories, really.
Do you think the Bentwater case had anything to do with the nuclear weapons that could, or I know there's no definite answer whether they were there or not, no. But do you think it could have had anything to do with that at all?
Well, bearing in mind that Robert Hastings very graciously did an afterword. Obviously, you're aware of Robert's interest in UFOs and the nukes. Well, first of all, Sizewell B power station. There was an awful lot of activity over there, and it's recorded in the Halt book, even with photographs. Certainly a lot of triangular UFO activity over there. I've no idea if it interfered with the power station, but yeah, these things do happen. But I'd also feel that lot of UFOs are seen nowhere near nuclear power stations. But with regard to the question you asked me, I know that there's been a lot of talk about that the beams from the UFO. And again, I've come across many incidents involving beams from UFOs striking the ground. They were certainly seen to fall down into the area near the weapons support area. But as far as I know, there's no evidence to say that they interfered with the nuclear weapons. But I suppose if they had, I wouldn't be privy to it. And I don't think anybody else would be, or would they? I don't know. But yeah, I don't think it's nuclear weapons that attract them at all. But you know, but it leads to so much speculation. I mean, I was listening to a guy the other week who was associating the American the Roswell case with the Bentwaters case when nuclear weapons were interfered with to the Broadhaven case. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that the nuclear weapons were interfered with. They may have been, but I don't think there is any that is known about. So, as far as I know, but of course we do know that on occasions they will interfere. But I don't know whether this is a deliberate action or a byproduct of the fields of energy that surround these things, again, which certainly cause strange things to happen to us if we get caught up in them, you know, the radiation of the UFOs.
Right. Getting back to the drugging situation, because that's kind of interesting to me. Sodium pentothal wouldn't really affect a person, and there's some talk out there that there were other drugs used. And the only thing I can imagine, I mean, someone's going to tell the truth, and you know, sodium pentothal being a drug that it's supposed to be like a truth serum. You know, I wouldn't really understand why that would be used, because everyone would just tell the truth. But to be disorientated about the whole situation and to be part of a cover-up by being confused, I think is more of a use for drugs. It's the only thing that I can think of that would make any sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just think it's really puzzling. As far as I know, although it's generally accepted that that process was used as part of an interview technique with servicemen, I don't know any other cases myself where it's been used, and I don't know why it's particular to to the Bentwaters Woodbridge case. But it's clear that those guys had the power, and I'm sure that they did administer those drugs. But again, do you think that those drugs were administered as part of a camouflage disinformation exercise? You know, so that why should they have been administered? Because surely, at the end of the day, if you're a serving serviceman and you have witnessed something, whatever it is, undoubtedly you'd have to, you certainly be warned to keep quiet. And anyway, you sign, I don't know what the Official Secrets Act over there is, but there's an Official Secrets Act here. And presumably if you're a member of that department, whatever department it is, you keep your mouth shut if you're told to. So I don't know. It certainly is it's a bewildering case that there's so many twists and turns in it, and especially since recently, there's always claims of some pretty weird and wonderful stuff. And again, without naming names, people have come forward and said they were there on all 3 nights running. And this is not people you'll know about, Martin, but people have said they were there. And yet Colonel Holt's turned around and said, well, I have no idea about them at all. I didn't even see them. And, you know, I don't know. I suppose these people are after a little bit of fame, maybe.
It could be, but also, you know, I mean, I totally trust Charles Halt. But also, 1980 is a long time ago to remember exactly who was at any incident. So that could be tough. You know, it is possible, I'm saying, you know what I mean? But he would, if anyone would know, you would think it would be him.
Well, of course, he's got his memorandum. And personally, if something like that happens to you, the trek out in the forest and what he saw, I am convinced that would be burnt indelibly into your memory, and you would never forget it. On the perimeter, obviously all those years ago, I can't remember specifically about things from that period of time, but you asked me to remember when I was 13 years of age, and I was at my grandmother's house in Berkshire at about 20 to 12 one night, and I can see it in my head. And I was in a small room at the side of my grandmother was Spanish, and she married a British soldier. And but they had this Spanish African bed, a huge 4-poster thing. And I can remember, and I was 13, that's some years ago, and I can remember being in this sort of in the annex, and I was just dropping off to sleep, and I heard this horrendous breathing noise, and I looked out and saw this. I can only describe it as a small shape, like about the size of a child inside the bed, breathing. And I got up and looked at it and went to the door, and I can remember the colour of the door, the handle, Bakelite, and I can remember shouting for my mother, and she came up, and she put my mind at rest. But I didn't have a nightmare. We've all had nightmares and dreams, but what did I witness then? So, yeah, it's just an example of something that happened. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, because then you'll all know how bloody old I am. But it's just an illustration of something that I think with Charles Halt, he's got a very good memory. And, of course, he was a deputy base commander, and he did interview the guys. He did take statements off them, and yeah, as I say, I haven't bored you with that story, but it's something that happened to me, and is an example of the way that there are some things you don't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And something like what they went through would be burned in my memory, that's for sure. Now, I couldn't get Chuck Halt to comment on this, and I'll just see what happens when I ask you this question. What do you think about the binary code?
Well, you know what I'm going to say. I've met people that have also in the book. I know Brenda Butler, that has been a colleague of mine for a number of years, and she showed us around the forest initially. She has written binary code. I think before, she's writing writing this code for a number of years. I don't know what to make of it. As far as obviously, there's a lot I'm not going to say because it just causes too much hassle. But I have a lot of respect for Jim. If Jim Penniston says because Jim helped us with the book, and there's a lot of candid comments from Jim, and you'll be surprised by some of the revelations that Jim has mentioned in the book. But if Jim says about the binary code, and as I say, as far as I'm concerned, it's an honest, genuine guy. I've got a lot of time for Jim, and so who knows? But binary code is because we're all waiting for the book to come out, aren't we?
Right. So that's
because this book's due out, isn't it? Jim's book on the binary code.
I think
but
so.
It is beyond me.
He communicated with me on Facebook a while ago, but I just don't remember what he said about the details on that. But let's see the situation there. It's funny. This happened in 1980, and it was like 2 years later where this actually came out. Was it something like 2 years?
Was it? You're talking about when it was first known about.
Yeah.
Well, it was first known about actually on the 31st of December, 1st of January, 1981, when the guy called Steve Roberts, and everybody knows who his real name is here, but Steve Roberts originally approached Brenda Butler's partner at the time, Chris Pennington, and told him this story about something having landed in the forest, and he showed him an illustration on the back of a cigarette packet of what it looked like, and apparently the story is aliens came out of it, and that was given to Brenda, and that's what, as a result of which their investigation started, along with Dot Street, that I know very well. So I don't know so much that they would be the original whistleblowers, because a lot of people dwell on that term. But yeah, it was brought to their notice, and I think that was disinformation, but that's, but then, of course, as you know, it was then, Barry Greenwood from, have you spoken to Barry from Cause?
No, have not.
Smashing bloke. Well, him and Larry Fawcett did the book. It was Clear Intent.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, how many witnesses have you actually personally spoke to from the Rendlesham Forest?
Oh, I suppose witnesses to paranormal activity, witness to UFO activity.
The actual 1980 incident is what I was talking
the
about.
80 well, right, well.
Is that an adding machine I'm hearing?
No, I mean that is. I don't know whether you can't see very well, but you can get an idea. That is the index. That is the serviceman's index. You can see all the names on it.
Hold it up a little higher. Okay, for the listener only, there's pages of them. Pages. So these are people that actually witnessed incidences in the areas.
Yeah.
What you're showing me. Yeah.
Pages and pages and pages and pages and pages.
Wow, amazing. Wow. So you've really dedicated your life to this research, obviously. That's pretty amazing.
I have, yeah. Enjoyed every minute of it. We still haven't looked at those. Good thing I've got a good memory. We still haven't looked at those images. They're actually over there in the other chair, but I suppose if I can't lean over. So I mean it's right, but the other book I wanted to tell you about, actually, it's a very interesting one. This was Haunted Skies volume. You see that Haunted Skies volume 10?
Yeah, it's a little too close, but yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Any good now?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that was 1987 to 1988. So, and of course, I think there's
that's a pretty big book for just 1 year.
For 1 year, yeah. I mean, there's some amazing stuff, absolutely amazing stuff, illustrations and images, and
yeah, wow.
Just we've been thorough, and to be honest, if it wasn't for the books, I probably would get a bit despondent with all of this and not bother.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Because I just feel at least the books can record the progress and allow members of the public to look at the books and form their own judgments based on our investigations. I mean, as an example of perhaps how hostile this climate can be, my partner Dawn, who I hope is still working as hard above me industriously, she's never wanted to be interviewed or anything like that. She just I wouldn't say she's a timid woman, but she doesn't want to get involved with it. She's quite happy to do the proofreading and editing, I mean, but it's as Colonel Halt would say, it's been one hell of a ride. It's been fantastic, and we've met so many lovely people, and of course including yourself, Martin.
Well, thank you. So this, when I spoke with Chuck Halt last, he said that this is something that he puts on the shelf, basically. It's not something that's part of his daily life. And basically he said that he wasn't even going to do the book if it wasn't for you approaching him. How did all that come about? Was that when he came over there and did the talk? Is that what initiated this whole book?
Well, I'd seen him, if I remember right, I'd seen him the year before. His he normally stays at the Bull in Woodbridge, and I'm pretty sure I met him the year before and had a chat with him, and he was interested then. And then perhaps a year, sometime, yeah, it would have been just about that time. So I'm trying not to remember the image of. I was actually sat in a lounge with him at the Bull, and he said to me, because I can't forget this, he said to me, what beer do you recommend, John? So I said, well, that one over there, Colonel Halt. And he said, oh, the one with the yellow label. So he had a pint of the yellow label, which was a horrendously strong beer. You know, so he had a pint of that, and then I had a half with him. And so I don't know whether or not he perhaps capitulated and agreed to do the book after I'd given him a couple of pints. But it was Speckled Hen. We call it Speckled Hen over here. But seriously, I have a lot of respect for him, a lot of time for him. I mustn't forget that, of course, that the Halt perspective also allows me to publish previously unpublished sightings of the flying triangles all over the East Anglia area, and also, of course, early sightings from East Anglia, from the 1950s onwards. So, yeah, he's the guy that helped sell some of the books, because I can assure you that up to the current date, the books don't sell all that well, because we live in an age where people don't really want books anymore.
Yeah, there's you're right. There's alternatives, or books on tape, or there's
Kindle.
Excuse
me. Yeah.
Right. So, as far as the Halt perspective, was there anything in there that you can share with us? Any type of revelation at all, that anything new about the whole story that came out while you were doing that book?
Well, there was a lot of information. Servicemen contacted me, and they told me about some of the things they'd witnessed, on the airfield, and I've not heard from these guys before. I mean, there's a letter in front of me from somebody in the States who contacted me recently, about some of the UFO sightings they had there themselves. And also we include civilian sightings. So this is a list, a chronological list of sightings of UFOs that happened near the airbase. I interviewed I went to see, I never met him actually, but the police officers that went to the scene there was Dave King, and there was Martin Brophy. There was also Brian Creswell. Well, Dave King gave me a copy of his diaries, which are in the book, detailing what happened. And he also saw something pretty strange himself. Martin Brophy, many people never heard of Martin Brophy, but PC Brophy, who also went to the scene, had an amazing sighting incident which happened to him while he was at Woodbridge at the police station. And hey presto, 36 years later, we managed to track down the motorcyclist who appeared at the conference that had knocked on the police station door in 1981, complaining he'd been pursued by a UFO. So there is so much to talk about. Of course, the radar operatives, and there is so much that people will not have read about before, including mysterious, some strange accidents that had happened in the forest, and people that had seen strange entities in the forest as well. I mean, even the guy that used to do the rabbit catching, bloke named Jolly. Well, Colonel Halt remembers the guy Jolly, and of course Jolly, his job was to keep the rabbit population down. And on one occasion, he saw what he thought were children inside the forest, and he realized that they were not children. They were small monk-like entities floating above the ground. So he called the guys from the base out. They came along and took samples. But of course, no idea what happened to those samples or what the result of any investigation was. But Colonel Halt confirms that he knew that he knew the guy concerned, and that he has no reasons to suppose otherwise. So, but again, the problem is there is so much stuff in the book that people will not have read, and all I can say is we've been thorough. There's regression tapes from certain personnel that they will not have read before, and a lot of stuff that they will not be aware of at all. So, and of course, don't forget, we've spent a lot of time down there. There's some very unusual images captured on photograph, but without doubt, it's the apports, the stones, and I've got some stones over there somewhere. But we have been there in the forest, and you can imagine the darkness of the night. It's pretty cold about 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're sat there or you're stood there listening, and suddenly you'll hear a thump. Something drops down next to you, and you throw the torch out, and you'll see a pebble or a stone. Now you know it's the one that's just dropped down because it's still hot. Now, how can a hot stone fall out of nowhere? And that's happened quite a few times, and we've witnessed that. And we've even had the stones examined. Again, it's in the book. A scientist I knew studied the stones, and he said they're perfect replicas of stones. He said the only trouble is they are not old stones. There are no age-related fissures in those stones. He says, I've no idea. I can't give you an explanation, but they are unlike any stones he's seen before. They look like an ordinary stone. Of course, the forest floor is covered with stones. But my explanation, how do you heat up a stone? And again, we did investigate an incident in Washwood Heath, Birmingham, which was initially involved the interest of Sir Arthur C. Clarke, who sent a team of men over there in the 70s because these stones were falling like rain on somebody's house. And the interesting about that, I'm not saying that's the explanation, but there were 3 houses targeted. The house in the middle, and we eventually met up with the lady who's still living there now. The interesting thing is that they've stopped now, obviously, but the back garden there is a path which is constructed of old gravestones. Now, is it possible they were disturbed, and could they have caused these manifestations or these things to happen? But apports of stones are known worldwide, and to me that was maybe there's an association because often UFOs will occur around or close to an ancient site or energy or water, or as we say about nuclear power stations. So what is the association? I mean, why? That's what I'd like to know, why. But yeah, there's just so much stuff. Bizarre, yeah.
Yeah. Now that when Chuck and the other witnesses saw this eyeball-like thing bouncing through the woods and then into the field and then the molten-like dripping, they were never able to find any samplings of that molten or whatever it was dripping from that. Is that right?
That's right, but I think that's the that's an idea of actually what the sort of thing. You see that all right?
I do, and it's funny you have an 800-page book, and somehow you know how to open to that.
No, that was just fluke. Before I forget, there was a lady contacted. It's Ronnie, a guy called Ronnie Dugdale. A lady contacted him. It must be a couple of years ago now, and said that she'd American accent, American accent. He's got a market down. He's come from Bury St Edmunds, but a lady spoke to him at a market. He sells fruit and flowers and things, and she said, "I've got this piece of metal, and I recovered it from the crash scene the day after." And we do know an awful lot of people went to that scene the next day, and this particular lady handed over the metal to him. He didn't get her address. She didn't volunteer the address, and she's never been back. But we sent some of that metal over to a guy in the States. His name is Nick Wrighty. I don't know if you know him, but he has been involved in a lot to do with some of the metal at Roswell over the years. Okay. Sadly, Nick, lovely guy, passed away a couple of years ago now, I think. But the metal was examined and found to be highly unusual, and not just a piece of lead or molten aluminium, highly unusual. So, but we obviously artifacts have come to our notice,
right?
And of course, but that's all in a book.
Yes, it would be really something to get some type of definitive, evidence of something. There's always seems to be an answer for whatever it is that is presented. And it may just boil down to there's only so many elements in the universe. Who knows? But the configuration of alloys is the thing you often hear about is slightly different.
That's right. And I mean, with all due respect, how the hell do you get a control sample? How do you find a control sample from another planet?
Good point.
How do you do that? You can only surmise and speculate, but it isn't what you can rule out what it isn't. But for me, overwhelmingly, if I wasn't aware of the predominance of other UFO sightings involving similarly described characteristics of behavior as Colonel Halt described and his colleagues, well, then I would still remain perplexed by it. But how can I not associate with all of those tremendous number of sightings, by members of the public of what are clearly unidentified objects, many of them triangular, with what had happened around that period, or certainly what had happened in the forest? You can't take that out. You can't dismiss any of that from from the story. So I personally believe that it was. So does Colonel Holt. He describes it as extraterrestrial in intelligence, and a lot of people will argue till the cows come home about the difference between interdimensional and extraterrestrial. I don't think it's that important, because whatever it is certainly unlikely again to be orchestrated or constructed by man. And for those people that bleat on about them being examples of top secret technology or covert technology, well, let's just think this out, because round about the 1900s, before man could even get up there and had even built an aeroplane, although I suppose they had balloons, these things were still being seen then. And it's my feeling that if you had enough funds, you could actually write a book about UFO sightings from the 15th or 16th century, which were not fireballs, bolides, meteorites, or whatever rational explanations you could find for some of this stuff. Those were certainly very similar to what we've been seeing in the in the 21st century. So how can you deny this stuff? I mean, my money's on the UFOs for this one.
Yes, I was sort of surprised that Chuck did actually say that that's what he thought it was, and only because that's kind of a big step, and something that is kind of daring for someone with his position or credibility.
Well, it's a leap of courage, isn't it?
It is,
and he's certainly got the courage. And I will talking about Chuck again. Of course, it took the world. If you look at Wikipedia for Colonel Charles Irwin Halt, and it took the world about 30 years before anybody could even realise that I stood for Irwin, and of course that he was an accomplished mountaineer, and that he didn't just serve at Bentwaters Woodbridge for a few years. The guy has had a checkered career and a fantastic career You know, I mean, to all intent and purposes, he was never really interested in entering the Air Force. He was a very clever chemist. Very clever chemist. That's what he was going to do. Yeah. And some of the anecdotal, I won't read it obviously, but some of the anecdotal information, and I must show you some of the, I mean, there's a photograph of him with his wife here, you know, his wife is,
yeah. Wasn't he also, just because a lot of people will be listening to this instead of seeing the visual, wasn't he also, was he an Eagle Scout as well?
He was, yeah. I mean, I've got pictures of him when he was I think he's a lieutenant there, and pictures of him under some stalactites, early photographs, even to when he used to do a newspaper round. I think, let me get this because I'm only just dredging my memory on this. But he used to do a newspaper round when he was a kid, and I know they're all going to laugh and probably take the mickey, but he came from a very poor family, and you know, it was a situation where, you know, you had holes in your shoes, and the only way you could stop that was pack them with newspaper. I mean, just an illustration, he was not from a rich family. He was from a poor family, from Pittsburgh, you know, the industrial sort of revolution there. But he was he actually came to Britain as a scout on one occasion, some jamboree reunion back in the 60s or 70s. I can't remember exactly. So he's a much-travelled guy. And if you relied on that stuff on Wikipedia, you'd know very little about him. But and of course, he's also been involved in some traumatic things as well, you know, recovering pilots' bodies from downed aircraft and shipping them home. And, you know, he's a fascinating bloke. But what I like about him, he's honest. He's honest, and you know that yourself. There's no, I'll say it, there's no BS about him. He's straight to the point, and you know that's how he is, and perhaps that's why I get on with him so well. And he certainly allowed me the privilege of writing this book together with him, and we are working on a second shorter one as an update, and also allow people the opportunity to see something about the other book. Now, I don't know whether there's flickering lightning in your studio, but there's.
I see it.
The pictures.
I can't do anything about it.
Oh, is that your end or mine?
Yeah, it's my end, and I don't know what it's going on.
Okay.
So give the viewer on YouTube something to talk about. Also, I had a nice talk with Chuck about building a house. You know, he's built this amazing house on a mountain that is completely efficient in so many different ways. Is really interesting. And he said he would give me a hand if I wanted to build, because that might be on my agenda at some point. What a great guy he is.
He is. Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little bit about this, and I can't hear it, but you should be able to hear it. Hang on. Let's see.
Sorry, I'm just wondering if there's some sort of subliminal message with the flashing in front of my eyes.
It's probably the Men in Black again. So this recording, I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about that recording, and that is, what do you think would have happened to the Rendlesham Forest case without that recording? Do you think it would be viewed as a totally different thing? In other words,
undoubtedly, because the recording is a genuine one, and it's honest. It's exactly what took place. Although, again, not many people will be aware that because he went out with a number of men, one of whom was Munro Neville's. Do you remember Munro Neville's?
No.
Well, he was the sergeant that went out with him. He was the photographic specialist.
Okay.
And Munro, I'd be interesting to find out what happened there, because Munro Neville's, prior to that tape being taken, had already, so he says, and I accept what he's saying, had already been out into that the forest and had found the marks in the ground. And as it was getting dark, went back to the airbase with Lieutenant Bruce England. And it was Bruce England, who nobody's ever been able to interview, as far as I know, that then directed, went and told Colonel Halt that they're back. And so, yeah, that's an interesting snippet from Munro, the fact that he'd already been out before. But of course, to me, one of the most, and I say it, not exciting characters, but the lady that I would dearly love to get in touch with, of course, is Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin. Well, Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin had quite a hair-raising experience. One of these things went through the vehicle she was in while she was out in the forest, and frightened her so much it made her pretty ill. And of course, there's no doubt a lot more to that than we should probably ever know. But nobody's been able to. She is known, Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin, but nobody's been able to track her down at all. Just disappeared off the face of the earth. And can you blame her, though, in some respects?
Right. Now, what about the medical issues? Do you think that have, like Burroughs, do you think those are directly related, in your opinion, to the incident itself where they were close proximity?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I would say yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Again, I have a lot of a classic example would be the Jessie Rostenberg from it was now in her early 90s from Staffordshire, and in October 54 she went outside, wondered what had happened to the kids while they were taking so long to come home, and went outside and heard this noise, like a shushing noise, like water coming down. Looked up and saw this cigar-shaped object hovering over the house, out of which she could see the occupants looking at her. And within a short time, the thing disappeared. The kids saw it as well. She then telephoned the police, and the police came down, but of course it was gone by then. Managed to find a witness that had seen it about an hour later going over the nearby town centre. She had some horrendous problems with her blood, and it's a familiar pattern of events where people, doctors and consultants, will invariably ask witnesses, have you been in contact with any radiation, or do you work where there's any nuclear radiation? And of course, that was not the case, but she was ill for a short time and then recovered. And so, yeah, these things are dangerous. There's no two ways about it. Fantastic, but bloody dangerous. And some people, unfortunately, haven't lasted the pace, you know. So, yeah, undoubtedly, I think that John's medical ailment was sparked off, was caused, attributed to what happened there. So, yeah, they're not all peace and wonder, are they? You know, sometimes people can be pretty ill by them. So
now, as far as I know, there's no one else that's ever claimed they've actually reached out and touched a craft other than Jem Peniston, which is quite daring to do in the first place. Has his any medical issues related to that actual contact that you're aware of?
Not that I know of. No. And that you're right about that was that close contact. I've met an awful lot of people that have seen these things from 30 or 40 feet away. I specifically can't remember anyone that's actually touched it. I'm really struggling here. I can't say. No, I don't think I can remember anybody else that has actually got round and touched it. Yeah, which of course is pretty dangerous.
Yeah, I would think so. Getting back to the cigar-shaped craft, I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know what you know about this or not, but it seems to be interesting that a lot of these cigar-shaped craft seem to have windows, or I've heard portholes in a couple of cases. Very interesting. And
Yeah.
also, I have told this story, and I'll just tell it real quickly because you'd never heard it. And that is a friend of mine's father in Russia. Now, I thought this was 30 years ago or something like that, but I just found out it was only about 10 years ago, where he was going through a mountain pass in Russia, and a cigar-shaped craft came through the mountain pass, and when he looked up, he could see portholes. He couldn't see any occupants, but he saw portholes, but all the cars stalled in the pass. They all pulled over to the side of the road, and everyone got out of their car. Really interesting. Now, I want to go back into the MOD. Does the MOD have, or does your country, does the UK have anything like we have over here, like FOIA requests, freedom of information?
Yeah, freedom of information. That is a standard means of obtaining information. You can do FOI requests, but I did an FOI request some years ago on a case which still fascinates me, which I'm looking at again, is Police Constable Perks up in Cheshire came across a landed UFO, and he made a drawing of it, and he then contacted the MOD. It wasn't in the newspaper, but the MOD have a file on it. And the last time I asked them about that file, they said it would cost something like 150 quid and 150 pounds to purchase that file. But generally speaking, let's be honest here. Over the years, I've seen the huge amount of excitement that's generated when the MOD have declassified their files. Nowadays, it's through the Public Records Office. So, of course, people out there think, oh, wow, this is disclosure. But I'm sorry to have to say, but, and I echo Robert Hastings' words here, because remember he said that the type of stuff that they release it's low grade sightings, and I've looked at the stuff they've released over the years. It doesn't happen so much now, but of course, it's wild, unsubstantiated stories and tales of people that write to the MOD and want to trip in a flying saucer, or it's somebody that wants them to come and open a UFO group. And I just think that the real stuff is kept from us. And I can only say that, isn't it odd that of all the thousands of sightings I've recorded, these are not lights in the sky. These are a lot of cigar-shaped, triangular-shaped, all manner of things that are seen by the public. Why have none of them ever been released?
Really? Wow. Now, what about on? Pardon me. What about on Bentwaters? Anything ever released out of that?
Well, of course, there has been a lot of documents released, and there is a lot of speculation that there are 8 remaining documents that should be released. But I've seen nothing that's really assisted me or helped me at all. I mean, and that's. I do have to say that. Nick Pope helped us. Again, Nick has been candid, and Nick has been a tremendous help. A lot of respect for Nick. Of course, he's an ex-MOD man himself. But as far as getting access to certain files are concerned, I think that they're never going to see the light of the day. Another case that springs to mind involves some girl guides back in 1970. We tracked down the lady's name, Alwyn Davis, I think her name was, and they were out camping, and this thing appeared above the tents, circled around, and then an RAF fighter jet turned up, and it was all reported in the paper. I contacted the MOD along with another sighting by a police officer, and I was told that the 1971 documents and files would be released. Now, as part of their release under the 30-year rule. Well, I've not seen anything released at all, and I don't think it ever will be cases like that, because the last thing they want to do is alarm the public, isn't it?
Right. Oh, jeez. The thing that we're just about at the end of our time here, and one of the things that I had thought about earlier is, do you think that the triangles that everyone talks about here in the United States, a lot of people come up with the theory that they are advanced military, secret black op type of craft, advanced craft. My argument to that is, people were talking about them in the 70s and earlier. And if you look at David Marler's book, that goes way, way back. But what do you think about the I want to say, and I don't think skeptic is a bad word either, but let's just say the skeptic will say that they're probably advanced military craft. Do you think any of them might be, or do you think that's kind of rubbish?
No, I don't think that at all. Over the years I've said to people, well, look, why don't you come up and the same would apply to you if you were down the road. You come up and have a look. Some of these files I haven't even opened. A guy called Ron West, who was a member of the Essex UFO group back in the 70s, he methodically interviewed anybody and everybody that had triangular sightings in the East Anglia area, and he went and I've got all the forms, the photograph, the illustrations. These things have been seen for a long time now, and I don't believe that is the case. It's easy to put that forward to rationalize them, but as I say, what if that was the case? Why would these things hover? Why would they? Here, I'm just gonna. I know you say that people can't see, but these are some of the things that are being seen. And a lot of them are triangular. You can see triangular ones there. This is in a short period of time. I don't believe it. That's bull. I'm sorry, and I know I can't categorically say that hasn't happened with some situations. But why would those top secret, covert technology, stealth type triangular UFOs hover over somebody's house?
Yes, I did that.
Would make sense.
I have mentioned that. There's someone that listens to the show that said there's a reason for that, and that's just to see the public reaction. Another person wrote me and said that the reason they go over different places is to see how the gravity, anti-gravity reacts with different landscapes. So there's, just people speculating. That's all that really boils down to.
Well, but how could they? So was that technology available in the 40s then?
That's right. That's
the thing. I don't think it was, but I don't know. Maybe it was, and maybe we're. You're right. Maybe these people are right. I'm only offering my opinion.
No, I agree with you there when I said you're right. 1940s, 1970s even. I can't believe a secret could be kept that long, and if those things did exist, why wouldn't they be used in the war? A war somewhere.
What about the Second World War? Again, what about? I'm sure that if we had the resources and we these things can be. In fact, they are tracked back to the First World War. Got sightings from around 1912. So again, I don't think we were that.
Yeah. Now, here's a question I have: why do you think there are different types of craft? And if you're speculating on that, would you think that these are from different planets, perhaps, if they are actually extraterrestrial? I know that's sort of a half fringe question, but just what are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think there are. I don't think there are separate craft at all. I think that there are all the same craft, but the necessary criteria which applies when people see, people don't see all of the craft. Sometimes they see part of the craft. A lot of people will talk about seeing a grid section. A lot of people will talk about seeing cigar-shaped object. It all depends. Dawn herself took some photographs in Wiltshire a couple of years ago, and you've got a classic cigar-shaped object coming halfway through into the image. And I don't think we see all of them at the same time. And A lot of people will say, well, some person sees something different from another. But I go back to the 1990s when people were suggesting, these are UFO researchers, that the aliens, that they were developing their flying machines, and we could see the change between a Model T Ford and an advanced supercar, which I think is absolute rubbish. Yeah, it's just rubbish. But these things, they've been here for a long time. Sometimes we don't see all of them. And with all due respects, I can look out the sky now and see nothing. But how do you know there's nothing there?
Yeah, that's so true. It's a haunted sky, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so
Thank you very much.
Why don't you throw out your website, and how would someone get a hold of the most recent book, The Halt Perspective? And one last question. Are you working on something right now? You can answer all those questions. One more book.
Working on something?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not. Right. Well, if you go into Amazon, the books are available on Amazon. If anybody buys a book off Amazon, if they contact me by email, people can find me easy enough. www.hauntedskies.co.uk. If you buy a book, I'll send you an autograph an autograph from myself, also an autograph of Charles Halt and Nick Pope's. And again, I've been under some some attack because of this. But I think if somebody wants to buy a book, I'm quite willing to send the stickers out to them, the autograph stickers. Let them put in, because Charles Halt's done the autographs, same as Nick. And forgot what the other question was.
Okay, are you working on a new book now?
Forgot this one. Oh yes, we're working on we're working on the 2 revised books, finishing the Wiltshire book, and then hopefully we're going to start on the volume 12. Which is 1990 onwards, and we think that 1995 will be one book, probably 1,000 pages, one book, 1 year, 1995.
All right. Hey, well, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you very much for allowing me, and I'm glad it's gone smoothly.
We'll see you in the playback.
Thanks, Martin, for your time anyway. And thanks everyone else for listening. I hope I haven't bored you to death.
I don't think you have. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.